Hello to those of you who are already here and still waiting for a couple of more people to join us, but I see the numbers are quickly increasing and that makes me very, very happy. And I'd like to say that I'm very happy to be here. And here, meaning one of the largest companies, tech companies in Poland. I have just finished a workshop with their workers, with their employees, and they were so kind that they allowed me to use not only their conference room, but also their Wi-Fi. So we are safe and secure in that. I can already see that we have quite a nice crowd out there. So I'd like to say a nice welcome to all of you guys. And I can say that today's webinar is a startup master class minimum viable product. Yes, today we'll be talking about working on your MVP like a pro. And that means precisely that we will be talking about all the good practices of getting minimum viable product. There is also one very important thing to think about, and this is an opportunity to ask me questions during the webinar. We have decided to make it slightly more interactive, so there will be 3 sections of the webinar where I'll be definitely talking a lot to you, but then after each section, I want you to ask me questions so that we can have a bit of a dialogue provided by the amazing technology. And by amazing technology, I mean the opportunity given to us by Zoom. And in Zoom, you will find a nice little dot marked here by the yellow arrow pointing at a Q&A. So when the time comes for the Q&A, I will ask you kindly to ask questions regarding the things that we've just discussed or any other questions that might pop up to your mind. And I will try to answer them, but of course, there is this very good habit that I have that if I don't know something for sure, I will definitely say that I don't know, but I will check it for you. So there is also a chance to stay in touch if the answer to your question requires a bit of more of a mental thinking process. So I'd like to already announce the next webinar, which will be the 25th of April, and that will be the Lean Startup. That will be also the 3rd section of our Startup Masterclass by me, and by me I mean Piotr Bucki, however you want to call me. Okay, so I think we're good to go, and if we're good to go, the question is, what is the MVP? Okay, I'm pretty much sure that you have already heard this abbreviation, which is the minimum viable product. And the minimum viable product, it's been big part of the lean startup industry and the lean startup philosophy, I would say. But this is, like many of the concepts, sometimes misunderstood, because in theory it's kind of easy to understand how it works, but in practice sometimes it gets out of the hand. So to make sure you pretty well understand it and you can apply it to your designs, then I can just explain it very well. Okay, so a minimal viable product is a product with just enough features to satisfy your early beta customers and to provide the feedback for future product development. And that's the basic definition of the MVP. And in this definition, I would like to point to 2 very important aspects of this definition. First of all, early customers. I have underlined the early customers because it means that when you're talking about the MVP, you should have in mind the very early set of your customers that you want to test your MVP with them. An MVP can be a full product, or it can be just a feature in an MVP stage that you want to test. But speaking about the early customers, you also have to realize that those early customers should be your beta testers or a rather forgiving group of customers. Of course, they should have a specific problem that you're trying to solve, but they should be more open-minded. And you will find those early customers among your potential customers, but they are usually the ones that are mostly willing to try out new things. So look out for those things, and take in mind that when you're thinking about the MVP, thinking about the early customers and the target group that you're targeting to is very important. That can be a small group if you're operating in a business-to-business operations. It can be a slightly larger group if it comes to business-to-client. And another thing that I'd like to stress very much is that enables you, provides you enough feedback for future product development. And that is very important, that when you are gathering the feedback from the MVP, it should allow you to incorporate that feedback in your future features, in your future product. So let's settle that. That is a minimum viable product with a good target group of early customers you want to test it with, and with good techniques and a process of implementing the feedback that those early customers have actually given you. So now I'm going to give you like a step-by-step guide to building an MVP. Okay, and this step-by-step process will be introduced by a few words about the purpose of an MVP. Okay, well, the purpose seems kind of obvious, but it's very important to say that MVP refers to an minimum viable product, and the main purpose is that it helps you in testing, designing, and delivering the final product. The purpose is to launch a product quickly also. And that's one of the main things about it. I mean, you can launch it, it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be first to the market so that you can do it as quickly as possibly based on your idea, with also a small budget. And this approach allows you to collect the user's feedback for the primary product, and it can be included in the future iterations. With the help of an MVP, one can find the right audience, put the ideas based on experience, and save time. But also, saving time sometimes can mean quitting the whole thing. So that is the main purpose of the MVP. And I would say, for me personally, it is the fastest way to implement the idea into the product, and finding the test customers to validate the idea as soon as possible. And what are the benefits of an MVP for your product, for a thing? Is that it's a low cost. Well, of course, low cost means different things for different businesses, but it should be able to eliminate the cost, and it is the fastest and the quickest way to do it. And when you're doing and thinking about the MVP, you should focus on building the core only. An MVP, if it's an app or a web product or even a hardware, it should focus only on one idea and does not include any other functions or too many functions. The approach of an MVP belongs to the ideology of the lean startup, which means that it is built with minimum budget in a given time. And if you have just the main feature, you can reduce the cost of any sort of development. Of course, you cannot reduce it to the zero. That would be the holy grail of this lean startup, but you can reduce it greatly. And also you can reduce the risk of putting too much out there. The other thing is that it allows you to do a early testing opportunity. It is good to find out from the very beginning if your idea will work without investing your whole budget, or maybe sometimes without investing the budget if you're especially self-funded. And it gives you the opportunity to use the user intelligence and gather the feedback, because the MVP generally offers you the possibility to find out your potential user opinion and how they want to see and use your final product. Very often in the stage of the MVP, you will discover things about your users and your products and the features you're offering to them that you have not dreamt about. I mean, they will give you the answers. Just watch and observe them. And it also allows you the market validation, because an MVP helps you to understand whether your app, your solution, your web app is the right for your target market. It should present your brand well to the users and show them how your project is unique compared to others in this category. And this is the moment when I want to talk a little bit about the differences between the minimum viable product and a slightly new concept, which is called minimum lovable project, minimal lovable product. Minimum lovable product is similar to minimum viable product, but it puts more emphasis on the experience of the user. So given the fact that you're already testing something with the users, you already care about their customer experience in a way. So both are okay. And if you're doing the business to business, and I guess many of you are doing those kind of products since I've learned to know you in Marseille and in other webinars, it's safe to assume that the minimum viable product is fair enough for you. I mean, you are not probably building the love brand, so minimum viable product is something that you should be just fine with. And, you know, of course, one of the biggest benefits that I've mentioned is that it takes less time and allows you to go to the market fast. How fast? Of course, it depends on the reality of your project, but you should always design the MVP to be as fast as on the market as possible, allowing you to make the mistakes that will be less costly. So it also means that less development means lower app development costs, lower software development costs. The faster your app, your product is launched to users, the faster you will receive the feedback, and even the harsh feedback. And we've talked about it on during the testing webinar when I said that it's also good to put out yourself there to find out even and to sort of face the harsh realities of the market and the clients. Because as Mike Tyson once said, everyone has the plan until they enter the ring and gets punched in the face. So in this case, MVP allows you to go to the market and get punched in the face very early, but it shouldn't be the strongest hit. So you should be able to survive it. And of course, MVP is budget friendly. This is, of course, another very important advantage, as it avoids spending all of your resources right away and on things that may not work or may not be the right fit for your target. So I've generally talked to you about the MVP, what is the purpose of it, what are the main benefits of it, and now time for some questions, because it's now the Q&A. Notice how I beautifully designed the Q&A in yellow, because as you remember, the arrow that pointed to the Q&A button in the bottom of your laptop screen was also yellow. So now let's have a yellow Q&A section where I'm waiting for your questions regarding the things that we have just discussed. And after the questions, we will follow with the clear steps to building an MVP. And I'm kind of interested if you've already taken some of the steps that I'll be talking about, or maybe you've just, you know, have everything already ready. So now I'm waiting for the questions. I'm moving my cursor to the Q&A and kind of waiting to. Okay, I'm just slightly confused here with a tech guy in a tech company without the things. Okay, now let's just see if we have any questions. I think we have a chat. A chat is also nice to have, but I can see that there are no questions for now. So of course, if you don't have any questions, or if you come up, oh, there is one question already. Let's see how it goes. Something goes. Okay, we have open questions. MVP is different than the dummy product. I will answer right away, so I'll not type the answers in. Thank you, Mike, for this question. I would say that the MVP is one step further because it allows you also to test the functionalities on the market with the target group. And MVP can also be a product that the users can be using already. A dummy product or a simple prototype could be something different. So in fact, I mean, the dummy product would be like the precedent, the like something before the actual MVP. What if you okay, Maria is asking a very important question. What if your potential clients, after testing, trying your MVP, just threw all your work to the ground? Well, then you have to see if this feedback, which I guess you mean a harsh feedback, is really actual. But if they're clearly telling you that there is something wrong with the product, or you maybe observe that they are using it or not using it, or they are not recurring customers, or they are not willing to use it, or there are simply a lot of mistakes in the code, then you should definitely consider rewriting the code, or maybe even rethinking your idea. Of course, I mean, a harsh feedback is always a harsh punch in the face, but I think that maybe sometimes the thing is that maybe the potential clients were not your clients. So I think that sometimes the question is not, should I actually change the product, but maybe should I change the target or the way I think about the target group? Okay, and Malia is asking me, allow market validation isn't limited to the new idea. Of course, it's not just limited to the new ideas. It can be applied to the old ideas. You can sort of go back with your already done product to testing it again. Okay, so guys, thank you for those questions for this. Let's actually go further with our presentation. We are done with this little section of the Q&A, and that means that we're continuing with the steps to building an MVP. So since the MVP is all about testing your ideas and figuring out what exactly will work to proper target your customers. And again, answering to Maria's question, I think that sometimes it may turn out that the target group you thought was your target group was not exactly your target group. Especially in business to business, sometimes you might address a not correct decision maker or the stakeholder, as we like to call it, okay? So it's also very important to take that into the note. So you have to ensure that the MVP meet the needs of your actual customers, and everything will be easier from then on. So what to do? Well, market research first. At times, it does happen that the ideas do not actually fit the market needs, but you initiate an idea and you have to ensure that it fulfills the target user's need. So you can conduct the surveys, you can get the information, you can actually observe the trends, you can actually see what's happening, especially in the legislative market, just only to see that what you are offering is going to be the right fit for the market. So market research first. As far as I'm concerned, many of your products fall into one category or the market need. And on one hand, it's using the technology for the purposes of like agriculture or climate change or anything else. But at the same time, many of your products fall into the category of compliance with the legal factors. So it's very important in the market research factor, not only to take a look at the problems that your potential target customers are experiencing, but also what's happening in the legislation. Okay, so if they are obliged to introduce a certain change, if there is a new tax, a new law, a new fiscal law, or anything else that sort of pushes people towards certain activities. So for example, if there is an EU regulation that by 2025, I guess, you will not be allowed to use single plastic products. That means that, of course, there is legislation, so you have to observe how the market is trying to adapt to this new legislation, and maybe your startup fall into this new category. So there is always a chance to do that. And when it comes to the forces that you should be observing when it comes to market research, those are the three that I think that you already know because I have mentioned them before. But just to do a recap, these are social and demographic forces. That means that those social and demographic forces are the forces of the changing trends, generation, people, and everything else. So if you observe on your given market any changes in the way the customers behave, in the way that, for example, the previous models of the agricultures are changing, or there is suburbanization or urban farming or anything else that is an interesting trend, then be the ones to spot that trend first and to include that in your market research, looking for the new opportunities, even for the established product, I dare say. So it's very important. Where to look for this information? Well, Google Trends, trend websites, anything goes. I mean, observe trends, observe what happens on the conferences, especially in your certain industry. What are the futurologists saying? What are the keynote speakers saying? Make sure you take that into the account. Another thing that I have already mentioned are the legal forces. The legal forces that are sort of the forces that you don't argue with. And if there is a new law for many SMEs, for many big corporations, it means that they have to implement this law, this regulation. Sometimes they are doing it willingly, sometimes not so. And that means that there is also a market opportunity for your product to sort of facilitate, or accommodate that legal change that is happening. Take that into the account. It's a good way to actually follow what the European Parliament, what the EU legislation initiatives are, to be the first one to actually see them. And I know it takes time, but it also gives you a upper hand when it comes to market research. And there is also the technological forces, meaning that the technology that you will be using is widely spread now, or it can also mean that the technology necessary for the implementation of your solution is getting better. And it can be the example of, like, for example, 5G internet. It means that once this technology is available, many other products will follow. It also means that if the broadband network is spread wide enough, then it means that some of the implementations can be followed. If there are enough satellites in the sky, it means also that the technological forces allow you to implement your MVP faster. Okay, so now once you do of course, now I have talked about the market research for about 5 to 6 minutes, but market research does not take 5 to 6 minutes. And market research is really not only just cherry picking the data that supports your product, or your MVP. It's being honest and blunt about it. A cherry picking is a thing that we all do when in the discussion or in the market research or anything else. We just basically tend to look at the data that supports our argument, and we fail to see the ones that don't support our argument. So I think it's very important to be honest in the market research. It has to be an objective market research. It cannot be wishful thinking, because wishful thinking is good, but look how wishful thinking ended up for the one entrepreneur in Silicon Valley who for a couple of years built a $9 billion industry, and then it turned out that she was actually faking it and never gonna make it. And watch the documentary about the inventress in the Silicon Valley looking for the blood sample tests. I mean, don't follow those footsteps. And nevertheless, After you've done the proper market research, do this step: express your idea. And expressing your idea can be kind of tricky to some of you, because you might think that, okay, if I start talking about the idea, about the unique value proposition that I will want to offer, people might steal my idea. And I get that argument, I know, but I think that if you start early on to express your idea, you will also gather actual feedback from the market. So you might start blogging about it. You might start doing explanatory videos about it, just like the Dropbox did. So you remember, you can express your idea. You can do it, like I said in the previous webinar. You can do it by blogging about it, using Quora, asking questions, using Reddit even, and explanatory videos. They all fit. And when it comes to Reddit, you will also find a very geeky audience there that will help you. And even though their feedback sometimes might be harsh, it will be a very, very valuable feedback. Okay, so once you do that, you have to consider the design process and the user flow. And that means that you have to prepare the MVP in the way that captures the main goal of your app, or your web app, or your product. And then you have to think about the flow. Later on, I will share with you a very interesting technique that can be used for that, and I'm sure that you will be able to use it. And I will also ask you to, maybe if you use it, share it with me on my email. So first of all, regardless of the fact, I mean, no matter if you're using it, if you're doing it, operating in the business to business or business to client, you always have to be obsessed about the client. And that means that you have to design your solutions in a way that is convenient for your users. You need to look at the app or the solution or the designer from the user's perspective, starting from opening the app to the final processes, to all the processes, and be it purchase, be it delivery, be it anything else. And to define your user flow, it is necessary to define the process stages. And for that, you need to explain the steps needed to reach the main objective. And that is when the story mapping technique comes handy. No worry, I will explain the story mapping technique very soon. Then you need to list the project features. So first of all, list all the features that you want to incorporate in your product before you start building your MVP. And once the building process is completed, cross-check with the list. So when you have a list of features for each stage, you need to prioritize them. And to prioritize these features, you need to ask yourself questions such as, what do my users want? How often will they using this feature? In short, you need to eliminate the features that will be good to have, but they are not necessary in the MVP phase. Okay, so keep them in a backlog, but don't do them unless they are really crucial for this. And then comes the step 5, which is building your MVP. So, I mean, once you start building an MVP, you will encode the main features, you will encode the main processes, and then you will just build it, take it to the market, to your target group, to your beta testers. You will measure and you will learn in the process. And this process should be repeated. Build, measure, learn. And even if you have a already existing product on the market and you have recurring customers and you think that this is like the thing that you have already achieved and this is good, you can also add new functions using the MVP method. So before the full rollout of a new function, it's also good to consider the same process again. So before you implement a new feature or if you go into the new direction, or you produce like a sub feature or sub product, always follow those steps. Market research, thinking about the idea, designing the MVP, building, learning, measuring. And that should be the thing. So when it comes to the build phase, companies make a minimum viable product, which is basically a prototype. I might say similar to the dummy product, but slightly more, which is basically a prototype with sufficient core features to interest early adopters. And remember that those early adopters can be the forgiving ones, whose feedback, even harsh, helps you identify additional features you will need to appeal. You will need to appeal to a wider market. So this is like the nice family of testing the products in a group of friends that sometimes can tell you harsh things, but those things will be beneficiary for the future. It doesn't have to be the actual product, but can simply be the idea of the product. Then you go to the measure, and in the measure, you discover where there's a sufficient interest in the product to continue the product development, if there is a sufficient interest, and what features and functionalities should be added or refined. And then comes the next phase, and this next phase is the learn phase. And in the learn phase, based on what you've learned from your early adopters, the next decision point is whether to persevere, to continue with the next iterations, or sometimes to totally pivot. Can you carry on with the same product strategy, or do you basically need to change some aspects of it, or do you need to shut down the product development entirely? If early adopters like the MVP, and even if they have some comments, but they still like the MVP, then persevere. But sometimes you might want to pivot, and that's not a bad thing. Some examples of pivots include, like, other features are discarded in favor of a single feature that becomes the final product. Sometimes the product becomes larger to incorporate missing features or functions. Sometimes you discover that other customers' needs are more important than the ones that you thought that you needed to address with the MVP offered. So it's back to the beginning again in this case. I have once pivoted in a form that other features were totally discarded in favor of a single feature that became a product itself. And that was at the time when I had a brilliant idea. Like most of you guys, we all have the brilliant idea. And I had a brilliant idea of creating an app that would scan the receipts in order to allow people to not only have the full insights into their spending habits, but also to have one place where they can keep all the receipts just in case of a warranty. And that was a brilliant idea. But when we researched the market, we found out quite harshly that the people were not so keen on doing that, on using the app. But the funny thing is that in the process, we have actually came up with a quite interesting technology that allowed us to digitalize the receipts, all of it. So we were not only just scanning it, but we were digitalizing it. And we decided after the measure learn phase that we're going to abandon the project of an app, and we focused totally on this technology, on this OCR that was allowing to digitize very, very complicated fonts in the receipt. So that was what we've learned, and that's how we pivoted. And then remember, MVP is not really a product, it's a process. And if you use the words maximum and minimum, it means that you just want to do the maximum and learn the maximum with the minimum of the cost. And MVP can be a part of your strategy and process directed towards making and selling a product to the customers, but it also can be part of your strategy and overall philosophy and thinking in the market. And I have just definitely briefed you on the basic steps of creating an MVP. And as far as I can see, we have already got 4 unanswered questions waiting for us. So we will go to the Q&A once again, and let me just go to the Q&A panel right now. And in this Q&A panel, whoa, we have quite a lot. Peter, hi Peter, Peter here. So we're both Peters. What are the definite signs to scrap a product? Well, I'm sure that there are many. I mean, I would say that depending on your product, you can see. I mean, depending on the main goal of the product, you can see what are the ways that the product is not actually is not showing a promise. So, for example, if you're designing the product that actually requires people to be the recurring customers, so they should have come up with the habit of getting back to the app very often. Like, for example, in the case of Facebook, I mean, the main purpose of Facebook was to have those recurring customers. So if that is the main goal of the app and you see that people are not coming back, then it means that there is something to take a look. The thing is that if customers are totally dissatisfied or using it a totally different way, or like in my case scenario, they were just not simply interested in the app, that would be the way to stop. Suvrait, what Dropbox did with the videos. Okay, so Dropbox, before developing any product whatsoever, they have decided to put on the explanatory video of how the product would look like. And they placed this, they played this video to the group of the geeks, so that would be interested, like their target customers, and they were waiting for the answers and for people to register to the landing page, and that's why they got a lot of interest. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Of course, the good point is, right, that sometimes they might like something first, but later not so much, or they might declare that they like it, but they behave differently. I'll give you a very simple example of not taking customers' declarations very seriously. Sony once did a research on the color of the boombox. That was in the 90s, where the boombox, you know, those big players, were a kind of a thing, and Sony wanted to find out which color should they be, because they had black and yellow, and they wanted to test which would be a better catch for the market. So they actually did this research, and they did those focus groups, and they were showing the people the boomboxes, and most people said that they preferred the yellow. The participants of the study were not given any money for it, but instead they were allowed to take one boombox home after they left from the research. And guess what happened? Most people walked away with a black boombox. So they declared they wanted the yellow, but they still took the black. So it's also, the thing is, so I would say, you know, users provide useful feedback, but very often observation of the users is much better. Maria, do you think it's a good idea to test the MVP not only with the potential customers, but also with other possible targets? I think it would be good to actually have a control group for the test, but I think that it will just don't spread yourself too thin. I mean, an MVP is really a difficult thing to conduct in terms of, I mean, it's low cost, and but it kind of takes away a lot of your energy. So I think that it would be good to actually do it, of course, with the most promising target group. You can take some other control groups into the account, but you can do it in a process. And sometimes it's good to just maybe just design the sort of research phase with different target groups and with different stakeholders, for example. The measure phase with an example, Malia, a very good question. I think that when you want to measure something, first of all, you have to know what you want to measure, how you want to measure, and what are going to be your KPIs. So I'll explain with the Facebook. The initial Facebook platform was a very simple platform. It was an MVP where one thing only you could do was just to stay in touch with your friends. That was the basic thing. But what they wanted to measure actually was not just the number of new customers, but they wanted to measure very much the number of the recurring customers. So in the measure phase, you actually have to know what you want to measure and what matters to avoid looking at something that we call the vanity metrics. Okay, that ends this for a while, and now we will basically get back to the thing again. I think that I hope that you can see the screen again. So why would you use an MVP after all? I mean, why would you need an MVP after all? Well, first of all, you are able to test the product with a minimum resources. You can reduce wasted engineering hours, and you can do all of those things. And remember, a minimum viable product may be a prototype, an entire product, or a set of product such as features. So even with running products, you can still have an MVP. Right now, as we speak, I'm sitting here in the largest tech company, the largest e-commerce in Poland and in Eastern Europe. And I can pretty much assure you that when they have a new feature or sub-feature, they go through the MVP process just to test it with the users. So it can work also if you're a big player. So the MVP is also intended to ensure that the market wants the product before a large time and monetary investment is made. And so it goes all from the methodology of release early, release often, and listen to your users and let them define the future and the future of the product. When it comes to drawing out the hypothesis of your MVP, it is good to think about the things like the canvas. I will discuss the canvas in detail in the Lean Startup, which is the webinar that we will have on the 25th, but just wanted to mark this. And the main difference is that with a regular process, like the processes of the past, we would have the idea, and then with time, we would mature the idea, and we would go from the proof of concept to the mature in a kind of like a straight line. So, okay, you had the idea and you would start right away and you would basically do that. But in the MVP kind of way, you do it this way. So you have the idea, you reach to the proof of concept, and you go back to learning and learning and learning. And of course, after a couple of iterations, you actually go better. And this is a large portion of your development time is trial and error to avoid mistakes. And it means that very often you ask yourself a set of two very important questions. What is my riskiest assumption? And what is the smallest experiment I can do to test this assumption? Okay, so now I would like to tell you an MVP approach step by step, but using a case study. So now we're going to go through an example, and this example is a totally abstract example, but I wanted to make it abstract in order so that it reaches the most of you, but I'm sure that you can apply this to your product. So let's imagine that you decide to build a product that allows restaurant owners to create a mobile app for their restaurant in just a few clicks. It will have to be a simple drag and drop interface, a bunch of pre-built templates, an event calendar, newsletter, check-ins, photo galleries, real-time chat, integration with the review sites, social networks, Google Maps, and most importantly, it will be the way to make reservation, place takeout orders, use coupons, and everything. So as you can already see, there's this idea, but with a lot of potential features. And let's imagine you decide that you have a few friends that can join you as co-founders. You have a stable budget that can be self-funded. So you raise some money also, you lock yourself up for 12 months and try to build all those features that I just mentioned, including the Google Maps and social networks and everything. If you're okay, maybe after a couple of months, you will launch it, but you might fail. Why? Because instead of researching and building an MVP, you have actually spent a lot of time composing and doing an app that the restaurant owners might not want. So I know it's nice to have features, and especially if you are tech savvy or if you are engineers, you might think, oh, it would be nice to have this, or it would be nice to have that. But no, that is a way to failure. So let's try another approach. And in this approach, you can do better. At each stage, we will be asking, what is the riskiest assumption and what is the smallest experiment I can do to actually test this assumption. So at the very beginning of our story, the riskiest assumption is probably that restaurant owners want to create mobile apps. So therefore, the very first MVP could be a mock-up of such a mobile app, maybe even one you did on the back of a restaurant napkin. So go around restaurant owners in your neighborhood and ask them what problems they have with technology. Maybe they already have a mobile app. If not, why not? Do they want one? And this is like the research phase. Find out if that would be a good solution to the problem, the mock-up that you have just came up with, the dummy prototype. You might find out there is not enough interest from the restaurant owners to make this a viable business. That's a shame, but that's a good news because you've not lost any money at all. On the other hand, you might find out that the restaurant owners are interested not in mobile apps, but in easy to create website. And that's a progress because you find out, okay, so now I will build a different type of the MVP. And so you decide, okay, I will not produce a mobile app, I will produce a web app. And now you ask yourself another question. Now, what is the riskiest assumption now? At this point, the riskiest assumption is that the restaurant owners would actually be willing to pay for such a website. What's the smallest experiment to do this assumption, to test this assumption? One idea for the next MVP may be to create static website by hand for a few of the restaurant owners who expressed the interest and see how they respond. Do they like it or not? Are they impressed or not? How much would they pay to have such a site launched today? Perhaps when faced with the immediate prospect of spending money, you will see that the actual owners are not actually that interested. So they would be interested, but in something that will be totally free, or maybe you will find out that they are willing to pay. So, I mean, nevertheless, you will find out and learn something more. And you repeat and you repeat. And after you, for example, implement the first stages in the manual process, then you can go, and again, what is the riskiest assumption? So the MVP in this case was just asking the right questions. And of course, creating something, first creating something on a just piece of paper, then creating something manually, but still creating and testing without losing too much money. So we can describe MVP as a product built from the smallest set of features that deliver customer value. So basically, you still have to keep in mind that it has to deliver value. But what does the smallest set of features mean? I mean, you might ask, and you would be right asking that question, how can we define this? And we can define this with something that I have mentioned before, and that is the story mapping technique. And I hope you can implement that because it's one of the best techniques that I have ever worked with. It's really user-friendly and it's a you-friendly thing. So the main idea of the story mapping is to replace the traditional one-dimensional list of features ordered accordingly to business value with a two-dimensional map which focuses on user activities and the overall vision of the product. So how it goes? Well, the first thing that you need to do is to capture the primary goal of your product. So capture the primary goal of your product, but not from your perspective, but from the user perspective. So for example, imagine you are developing a product which helps people to assemble their own customized shoes. So your product allows them to choose color, fabrics, decorations, and shapes of different parts of the shoes. As a result, each customer gets a customized product which suits their individual preferences. In the first step, we need to understand what our product does. So we need to define the main goal. And in this case scenario, a good primary goal would be allowing users to receive an individual customized pair of shoes. That's the primary goal of the product. So it would be also nice for you guys to actually check and see if you can capture the primary goal of your product. My product allows users to, and then complete the sentence. After you've done that, you have to define the main process in the product. So once you've captured the main goal of the product, you need to define what the main user flow in our product looks like. So then you need to define what the particular stages of this flow are. Actually, very often it is quite easy. We imagine what we need to explain to someone, what steps are needed to accomplish the goal, which we have defined above. So the rule is think less about particular features and to think more about tasks as customize a shoe, buy a shoe, like steps, not features. Steps in your process, not features. And all these tasks, when combined, define a process in which the majority of users will probably use the product. So they will probably want to customize the shoe, then order the one, and then be able to see the order, and later on, they will be able to have the shoes delivered to their home. And in reality, it should look like this. And in this, I totally advise you to do the brainstorming with your friends, with your colleagues from your team. So first, you like on the whiteboard or somewhere, you just put the primary goal. You set the primary goal. We allow users to do this and that and that. And then in the user flow, you actually put the certain steps. And think of them as steps, not features, because features comes next. So once you have this, you can go further and create a list of features that would be nice to have for each stage. And this goes like this. We look at each stage of the process and we define a list of features which would be part of this stage. So in this step, we try to boost our own creativity and actually define as many features as possible. So you just need to really go big on that. Don't hesitate to put as many features as possible. So for example, in the step of Customizing a shoe, the features could be choosing a color, choosing a basic shape, choosing a heel type, choosing a fabric, generating a 3D preview, save your customized shoe for later, share your shoe project with a friend, share your shoe project on the social network. Anything goes. Here, anything goes. In the step of the payment, pay with a credit card, pay with Google Wallet, pay with Apple Pay, pay with credit card, use coupon code, make use of seasonal sales, and so on and so on, share with a friend, anything else. The main idea is to put as many features as possible so that you receive a list of not prioritized features. And once you have that, and I really want you to think big on that, then you need to prioritize the features inside the list. And here, to do so, you need to think about very specific questions about prioritizing your features inside of the list. And I'll give you a couple of questions. It's worth taking a note. So the first question, in order to prioritize the features in your MVP, is how important is this feature for the finishing of the process? I mean, if it's impossible to finish the process without this feature, then it has to be one of the top important features. The second question is, how often will this feature be used? Okay, how many users, how often it will be used? How many users will be using this feature? I mean, what is our hypothesis? How much value does this feature really bring to the customer? Is it really nice to have, or is it really necessary to have? And the last very important question is, how risky is this feature, both in terms of development, implementation, and maybe even financial risk? And based on those questions, you rearrange the list, and you have on the top the most important features, high necessity, and then you have the low necessity at the bottom. And then magic happens, you define your MVP. So now you have all the features prioritized. The first row of the map defines something which is usually referred to as the walking skeleton, which in some cases can be the MVP, but sometimes it's a little bit less than MVP. The walking skeleton is like the basic process. It is the smallest possible representation of the working product, and this is something that you should build first, but sometimes you should add something. Because sometimes the walking skeleton is the MVP, but very often it's not the case. In some cases, our minimal product is slightly more sophisticated, especially if you're working on a minimum lovable product. So then you have to separate the features which are must-have from the nice-to-have or want-have. And it usually looks something like this. So up there on the top, you have the walking skeleton, and then down you have the MVP list. So now time comes for, I mean, I hope you do get the story mapping technique. So now I think that the time comes for next Q&A, and it will be the last Q&A here. So I hope you have some good questions to ask. I'm waiting for those. The story mapping technique should be something that you really should be doing, even with your existing products. It really helps you to do this mental model of the things, and it does really clarify a lot of things for you guys. So I do hope that you will use it and you will benefit from it. But right now, I'm just kind of waiting for the questions to come, or maybe you're just too busy now. Oh, there's one. And maybe you're just too busy working now with the story mapping technique. I hope so, definitely. Okay, is to put various feature preferable for the smallest set of features. I'm not sure I get this question. If you could please rephrase it. I mean, I'm not sure if I get this. The smallest set of features should be the smallest set of features that allows the user to actually complete the whole process, but it shouldn't be anything more, and it should include the must-have features. That is the smallest set of features. Okay. Any more questions? Do we have any more questions as for now? What about using external services in the MVP, possibly increasing costs and outsourcing coordinated by reducing the time to build it? Well, Francesca, I mean, I think that it is a very good question. I mean, if it speeds up the process and allows you to be first to the market or gain the competitive advantage of time when the timing is right, then I think that you could do that. And also, as I've mentioned in the previous webinar, which I'm sure you can go back to, I have talked about a piecemeal MVP, where you were actually putting the MVP from different parts, like even Excel spreadsheets and WordPress, and outsourcing that in that way also. So that will be also it. And Malia, is it wise to put various features? Well, it is only wise to put as many features as you really need. And the process should be one one primary goal. But of course, if you are like the marketplace or you have two sets of customers, then you should define those processes separately, because they are usually separate processes. And I think that, okay, we have one more question. Let me simply quickly, no, we have that answered. Okay, so we don't have any more questions, which means that I want to return now to where we've been. Oh no, that's not it. I'm sorry. That looks kind of weird right now. What I want to do is to share with you the last slides of our webinar. Oh no, it looks kind of weird. Well, nevertheless, we're not going to worry about the technical things. What I wanted to tell you guys is that. Oh, sorry about this mess on my desktop. It looks like, okay. Okay, that's the slide that I was looking for. And that's the last thing, which is always remember, build as fast as possible, measure taking into the account the most important metrics in your thing, and learn, even if it means taking the lessons hard. So, as I have mentioned, I would really love to hear from you guys. So, if you especially come up with the nice story mapping technique templates, you can share it with me on my email. I have a Space Tech email, so you can use that, or you can find me on LinkedIn also. And I really do hope that you found this MVP seminar useful. Of course, it's a lot to digest, and I suggest really digesting it quite fast, because the whole ideology and methodology of MVP is doing things fast and not waiting for things to happen. So I'll be waiting now for some additional questions if you should have some. And I wanted to thank you again for showing up, and actually showing up all on time, which is, very important to me. Okay. 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 Oh, okay. Well, I can see right now that you're already saying some buys, and again, thank you for being it. The story mapping technique, yes, as I can see, is to your liking, so I should think so. And I really do hope to see you in the next webinar, which will be about the lean startup. So we'll like combining all the techniques together. And by this time, I'm sure you will come up with the nice story mapping techniques for yourselves. So thank you so much for this. And you can still enjoy a little bit of a chat in between yourselves. And looking forward to your next webinar. And bye here from Poznan, where I'm at the Allegro headquarters, the biggest tech company in Poland. So bye, see you.
Thank you so much, Piotr. And thank you everyone for being here. It's been a pleasure to have you with us again. And we cannot wait to see you again in 3 weeks on the 25th of April for our next webinar. You'll all get more information on our LinkedIn group, through the newsletter, and of course, per invitation by email. So thank you all for joining and have an excellent Thursday evening. Bye-bye.
Bye, ciao.